Hi there, good morning everybody. My name is Simon Field. Some of you will know me already. And I am the Sales Director here at Big Change. Welcome to today's live tutorial on stock and equipment. This is the basic session. We are doing a bit more of an advanced session this afternoon at 3 p.m, which I know a lot of you have already signed up for. We hope that you'll find today's session very useful. Because of the number of attendees for today's event, it will not be possible to answer questions individually, but I will be answering some of your questions at the end of the session, which have been picked from some of those that are going to be received throughout the session, which you can send through the chat, or alternatively through the email that we sent you in the link. I really hope you enjoyed today's session and today's tutorial and find it very useful. So during the course of today's course, what we're going to cover, so I'm going to introduce you to stock and equipment. I'm going to explain the difference between stock and equipment and how it's used in JobWatch. I'm then going to go on to creating a piece of stock and equipment. So I'm going to begin by going through the product categories, explaining what these are and how these are created. I'll then move down a level to make some models, again, explaining what these are and how these are created. I'm going to then introduce you to custom fields on pieces of equipment, which is a really useful function, which allows you to bespoke the way that stock and equipment is used by each individual company. And I'm going to go through how we allocate a cost and a selling price and allocate a supplier if you are using the system to purchase pieces of stock and equipment. I'm then going to go through stock locations and how these are managed in JobWatch. So I'm going to begin by going through your locations, so your stores, or wherever you keep your stock locations, and going through vehicle stock. So understanding how much equipment or how much stock each of your vehicles, each of your engineer vehicles are holding, before going through an asset register and how the system can be used to understand what piece of equipment your customers have at their sites. I'm then going to go through reorder levels and explain the stock reorder level report. Finally, I'm going to go through I'm going to create an example of adding a piece of stock to a site and also adding a piece of equipment to a site. And then finally, I'm going to go through notes, which is adding notes to pieces of equipment and how these can be used throughout. So I'm now going to move forward into JobWatch. So the tutorial today will be kicked off by giving you a brief explanation as to the differences of how stock and equipment is used in JobWatch and how they are defined. So stock is used in JobWatch to track and manage quantity levels of your mainly consumables. Often, as I'm sure you are all quite familiar with, service companies find it very challenging to understand what quantity of parts are currently being held in your stock or your storeroom, and also on each engineer's vehicles, and therefore what's actually being used on jobs. Therefore, we're quite unaware of what needs reordering at any one point. JobWatch allows you to therefore have a live understanding of these quantity levels, so you never run short of those much needed consumables for an urgent call out, allowing you to keep on top of quantity levels at all times. Furthermore, you and your engineers will have live visibility of who is holding what stock at any one time. So if one engineer was to run out of a piece of, a quantity of stock, they're able to see which of their colleagues is holding that particular consumable on their vehicle, and therefore get in contact with that with their colleague to see if they can use it and borrow it from their colleague. Or alternatively, they're able to see what's being held in your stores rather than going out and repurchasing something you're already holding. It might be quicker and more efficient for them to go back to your stores, collect that quantity level and add it to their vehicle to be used on a specific job. Now, equipment is used in JobWatch to track and manage the movement of your non-consumable items or serialized items. And whilst these are often these may be sold to customers. It might be, for example, in the fire and security industry, you might hold fire extinguishers, which are then sold on to customers. They may also be your higher value items that are used by your engineers on certain jobs. And this is something that is not sold potentially. It is important to track the movement of these as it may be crucial to you completing particular jobs. And it is therefore essential for everybody to understand where each of these pieces of equipment are at all times. So if they are being passed around from one vehicle to another, from engineer to engineer, they're important, they're expensive pieces of equipment that you in the office and your engineers need to have visibility of at all times. Furthermore, equipment can be used to record asset registers of your customer data, which I touched on at the beginning, ensuring you have a live and full understanding of what type of equipment and where each is located at your customer's site. This is often crucial data and can drive increased efficiencies when your engineers go to site to maintain or fix a particular piece of equipment. Again, this is something I will touch on shortly. So moving forward into the system, I'm going to start in the back office in the administration, which we can see here, which is where you can sort of create the data that will be used on your site, in this instance, stock and equipment. And these can be bespoke so that it suits your individual company's needs and how you use the system. So if I go into the administration tab here, as we can see on the left-hand side here, we have stock and equipment. So if I go into stock and equipment here, we can see 3 different tabs that come down, all have a different purpose for being within the site. So I'm going to start with product categories. So what is a product category? So product categories is used in JobWatch to define the types of stock and equipment that your business holds and manages. As JobWatch is bespoke and used by companies in a variety of different industries, and even within industries, there might be different types of stock and equipment that each company holds or works with. It allows you to have the flexibility to define what types of stock and equipment that you hold and manage. For example, a plumbing and heating company may want a product category called a general category called boilers. A fire and security company might want a general category called fire alarms or CCTV cameras, for example, and a roller shutter door company might have a general category called doors, for example, or garage doors. So each of these will be unique product categories. So I'm now going to show you how these are created, as they need to be created before you start to create any pieces of stock and equipment. So this is really the first thing that you will do within the system when you're using stock and equipment. So if I select this add button here at the top, this allows me to create a new product category. So once add has been selected like so, it shows us some examples that could be used. And I'm going to use, in this instance, I'm going to put SF to define me, CCTV cameras. So this is showing that we work with CCTV cameras. I'm also going to add another category, and this will be used later on in the demonstration, called SF screws. The difference will be between these 2 categories, and the purpose for them being there will be explained in due course. So now we've created the categories, we now want to define what types of items we work with within these individual product categories. So I'm going to move forward to, as we can see here, manage makes and models. And I'm going to create a brand new make and model. So I'm going to select this add button here. And this is the screen that follows. And we can see a number of different fields that need to be completed. And where there's a star, that's a mandatory field. So we cannot move forward until at least product category and model has been inputted into the system. The system will simply not allow us to create a new make and model. When I select this drop-down button here, we can see all the makes and models that we've created within our system. So I'm going to go straight down to SF CCTV cameras, right down here, like so. And now we can see the product category that I'm going to create this maker model within is CCTV cameras. The next question is nominal code. So this, and I'm sure some of you might attend the finance tutorial like so. This is where we can add our nominal and department codes that we will have also created prior to this within the back office. So I'm just going to make one up here like so. So we've put in our nominal code and department code. The next question is, what if this product has a make, what is the make of this product? So we're going to say, in this example, because it's a CCTV camera, it's a HIC vision. And if we've got a model, we can make one up. So I'm going to put DS 2CD 2T2 7GL-1. So there we've got the make and model of the type of equipment that we might be purchasing, that we might be maintaining within JobWatch. The next question is a really important question, and it goes back to the differences between stock and equipment. Now, this is a CCTV camera, and we might hold a quantity of these within our stores at any one point, but each of these cameras is unique. So we want to be aware, if one of our engineers does take a particular piece of equipment, we want to know that they've taken a specific CCTV camera, because this is a non-consumable. With a non-consumable, it will have it'll be a serialized item, so it'll be a unique item that ensures that we're aware of which piece of equipment is being taken at any one point. A non-consumable, which I will touch on shortly, is slightly different to this, which I'll get to later on within the session. We can then put in a size and weight if we want to, if that's required, based on the type of equipment. And then if you've come in for the session this afternoon, I will go through what the worksheets are here like so, and we can put in a batch number and a stock code, etc. We then come down to selling price. Now, if this is a type of equipment that you do sell, so when I say you sell, what I mean is if an engineer uses this type of equipment on a particular job, we want to be adding this as a line item so that it's charged to our customers. Now, not all of these items will necessarily be charged to a customer. It might be used on a job for a certain purpose. Now, what that means, again, and I'll go through all this later, but potentially this piece of equipment might be something that is taken out of a vehicle and installed into a customer's site, and therefore the customer needs to pay for it. However, it might be the type of equipment where it's used to assist a job, but it's your piece of equipment, and it will always be your piece of equipment that your engineers will use. So this type of equipment is something that potentially we would sell. So we might put the selling price is £75 in. Again, we can change the currencies, and we can put a VAT code in. Again, this will have been created like so. If we do have any attachments that we want to include so that it's always on this piece of equipment, we can also put that on here like so. It might be a user guide, for example. So moving forward to this suppliers tab here. So sorry, I'll say that. And now I'll go back into, so I'll search for that particular piece of equipment, and here we can see it here like so. If I then go into this supplier tab here like so, this allows us to input which suppliers we will purchase this particular piece of equipment from. Now, we might have a number of different suppliers that we regularly use, and these will have been created in our back office. So we can put in, if we select this add button here, we can then say, right, which supplier is this? So we could say, for example, it's Allerton School CCTV shop, for example. What is the warranty period with this item? It's 60 months from this supplier, and the cost from this supplier is £45. Again, we can then put another supplier in, so we might put in fire doors. This might have a slightly different warranty period, and the cost is slightly cheaper, like so. So that when we do go and purchase that particular piece of equipment, the system will know, and again, this is something I'm going to touch on this afternoon, the system will automatically know which supplier charges how much for this particular piece of equipment. So I've created that CCTV camera there like so, and we're going to come back to that shortly. So as I'm sure you recall, I did mention there are some differences between consumables and non-consumables. So I'm now going to go through the process of creating a consumable item, within our system. So in exactly the same way, we can then go to this add button here, and we're going to add the SF screws. Now, these are a quantity of an item of a quantity level that we might hold in our stock at any one point, but we still want to be aware of how much has been used by an engineer on a job. Again, these might be priced out to a customer, or alternatively they might not. It might be just something that you want to be aware of. We've ordered 1,000 screws. Simon's got 500 on his vehicle and he's used 200 on the job, so he now only has 300 left on his vehicle, etc. So we can put in the model as general screws, for example, and then we would select this consumable button here, and we can see a number of the fields that we previously did have are no longer available. Again, we can put nominals in and department codes if required. We might put a selling price in again, so we could say it's £2 per screw, and here like so. And once again, in the exact same way, I'm going to go back into that. Now we've saved it. We can then add the suppliers in for this in exactly the same way. So we could say it's from Big Change, and the cost price is 30p per screw. And there, once again, if we do use the system to create purchase orders, and we do buy a quantity level of screws, again, it will take it from that supplier and it will have that cost against it, like so. So now we've created two different types of stock and equipment, one being our consumable, the screws, and one our non-consumable, the CCTV camera. So the next tab we can see on the left-hand side is what we call stock item custom fields. So I'm going to go through this in exactly the same way. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we've got a number of different customers who use our products, all in a variety of different ways, all in a variety of different industries. But the great thing about using this, and not just in stock and equipment, but is the flexibility that the system allows you to have. So if I go into product category and go into the SF CCTV cameras, there might always be, and this is not depending on the type, when I say type, I mean the make and model, for our general of CCTV cameras, there might be some key fields that we always want to record about our CCTV cameras. So for example, we might want to know, does it have a fixed lens or not? So we can say fixed lens, yes or no, and we have different types of answers that we want to record. So does it have a fixed lens, yes or no? It's a number, a text. In this case, we'll put yes or no. We'll put it's mandatory, so that every single time we create a new CCTV camera, we have to fill this data in. And is it something that can be viewed by the engineers or not? Now, there might be some data that you want to hold about this particular piece of equipment that isn't relevant to the engineers. Potentially, you might just want to have a quick overview of where it's bought from, where it was supplied, and you don't want the engineers to be aware of that. Alternatively, or how long its warranty is. Alternatively, there might be something you do want the engineers to see, for example, where it's located, and they've got the ability to add and amend at any one point. So we're going to say that's mandatory, and it can be seen by the engineers, like so, but we don't want them to be able to edit it. Again, there might be another different type of field that we want to record called location in building. So a lot of our customers will work with a number of different pieces of equipment at their customer sites. Now, they might have 10 CCTV cameras at the customer site, and you want to be aware of the engineer needs to be aware of exactly which camera and where it is located. So what we can do is we can say location in building, and then we can say it's a text field, and we can say that can be viewed and potentially it can be edited by the engineers, like so. So I will get to that shortly, and it'll become a bit clearer as to where that sits within the system. So I'm now going to move forward to stock locations. So stock locations, and I'm going to move to this stock and equipment tab here, like so. So stock locations allows us to understand at any one point what quantity of a certain item we're holding across all of our different locations. So locations being all of our vehicles and all of our stores. We might even have more than one storeroom, but also we can see which vehicle's holding what stock at any one point. And as well as that, we can also see how many or what our customers are holding on their site at any one point. So particularly if we wanted to know what we've got in our stores, we could go in at any one point and say, right, how many, if we go to Allison School, for example, we can see this could be our stores, and we can see stores has a number of different pieces of equipment. If I just go a bit lower down, like so, we can see they've got 4 of these, 31 epoxy resins, 13 food safety sprays, and when there's a movement of these, it will track that movement. So if we allocated 6 of those to a vehicle, it would deplete that and remove it to 25, but it would add 6 to a particular vehicle, like so. So I'm going to go through the example now of adding a quantity of stock to your stores. So if we were to select this add stock or equipment button here, like so, this is the screen that we will see. And some of these fields you'll recognise, particularly make and model, as this goes back to something that we just touched on at the beginning of this presentation just a few minutes ago. So if I was to add a make and model, we could put in, for example, Hikvision, and we can see that is the Hikvision camera. This is a type of camera that we are creating at the customer site or at our stores. So we can see here, like so, we're adding that. It will then ask us for a serial number. Now, the system requires a unique serial number for all non-consumables. So each has a unique identifier, like so. So we can put in the serial number, and if this is a barcode, we can put in the barcode. And when an engineer goes to scan a piece of equipment that they're using from their vehicle on the site, they can use a barcode reader, which will scan the barcode. Again, I'll go through this in this afternoon session, which will say, are you looking at this item? Yes, and they're then allocating it to sites. We can then add in alternative serial numbers if there's more than one serial number that each piece of equipment is holding, and supplier serial numbers and customer serial numbers have been added in, like so. We can then choose what type of, is it stock or equipment? Now this is equipment, and is it to be sold or not sold? So again, this goes back to something I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Certain pieces of equipment will be sold, other pieces might not be. If it has been sold, we can then put in the date, and we can say this piece of equipment has not been sold yet. We can put in what it's used for, like so, and then we can add in when it's been created here, like so. We can add in additional notes against this equipment as well, if we wish. The next tab here we can see is location. So location then has 3 different options, and JobWatch allows us to manage equipment in 3 different ways. So equipment can be either held at a contact. Again, this could be a contact being either your stores or a customer site. That's a fixed building location is what a contact will be. A vehicle, now if a piece of equipment has been allocated to one of your engineers' vehicles, we can now say it now sits on the vehicle. So it's been bought and it sits on the vehicle and straight away, or potentially it could be allocated to an item. And again, I'm going to go through this in a bit more detail this afternoon. If a piece of equipment is allocated to a different item, potentially what that means is it might be a pump, for example, with different pieces of equipment installed into it. So it has the parent piece of equipment, and then beneath it, the child items that are allocated to it. Potentially, it might be an equipment with batteries in it, and you want to know what type of battery is in that particular piece of equipment. So we're going to add the piece of equipment to this contact, and I'm going to call it Leeds City Building Control Services, for example, which will be our customer site. We can then add attachments. It could be a picture of it, or any details that we want, a PDF, for example, that we want to have allocated to this piece of equipment. And then, based on the type of equipment that I've chosen, there are additional fields that we can see here. So, as you saw when I created a CCTV camera, we gave two options. We gave additional fields that we can see here. So whatever type of equipment your business, your company is creating, everything from make and model down to attachments is included, whether it's a plumbing and heating company, whether it's a fire and security company, a roller shutter door company, a building maintenance company. However, the chance to bespoke the site using custom fields comes in really useful here, and we can see here like so, the additional fields that you want to create. So it's got a fixed lens. If at this point we want to put the location in the building in, we can do it if we know it at this point. So if you wanted to, you could say, it's on the first floor, like so. That piece of equipment will now sit against that customer site. So if I now go into that customer site, Leeds City Building, within our CRM, and go to edit, and go to this stock and equipment tab here, and go to equipment, we can now see that this site is holding one piece of equipment. We go into it, again, we can see the location in building, etc. here, like so. So just going back to this stock and equipment tab here, like so, I'm now going to show you how you create quantity levels of stock rather than a non-consumable item. So if I was to add stock and equipment, again, we can put in we can put in screws. General screws, there we are, like so. And we can see the number of fields that we can use here has been depleted like so, as it's as we require less information. So we might say we've got 100 screws on our site, and they're to be used as stock. They're not to be sold, and they're once again they're either at a contact, on a vehicle, or allocated to item in the same way as we did previously. So I'm going to now say this is our S field big change, like so. I'm going to save that, and now if I move forward to that contact, we can then see, like so, that this contact now has 100 screws at that site that are ready to be used. Now, if 50 of those are then allocated to a vehicle, obviously it will deplete this quantity level by 50, and it will add 50 to the vehicle that will be using it, like so. So that's a kind of general overview of how we add pieces of equipment to site. And again, if you join in later this afternoon, I will go through purchasing pieces of equipment and how they can be added that way as well. So if we then go to reorder level, this is a really, really useful function that can be used to track, to ensure that you never go down a shorted level as you require. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if screws were really vital to you being able to complete a job, you never want to be in a situation where you've got a call out, and to ensure that you complete the call out, you need these general screws. You go into your system and you go in and you try to allocate the job, and you realize, wow, we're out of screws and we've got nowhere to purchase them, and we can't complete that job as expected. What we're then able to do therefore is have reorder levels. So this is our stores. We can go into the reorder level and we can select add, and we can choose what, based on this particular site, is important to us. So we could say general screws. There we go. And we could say this has a reorder level of 15. So what that's saying is, once we get down to a shortage quantity, we want to be made aware. We want to ensure that we never get below that reorder level quantity. So we've added that against our site. We go back in and we can save that. That will now sit against that site like so. We then have a really useful function within reports, and again, we are going to have another session later on next week on reports, which I'm sure a lot of you might tune into. But if I go into the reports and we go into stock reorder level, like so, we can view the level of stock by location where reorder level has been reached or is being approached. So potentially we can go in and we can filter it by the following 6 functions like so, or 6 filters like so. Now it might be you want to search on a particular, if you have a department, you might only want to search on a particular type or a particular product category. Or one engineer might want to search, if you allow them to, or you might want to search for them on a particular vehicle. Alternatively, you might want to just search by your location. So we're going to say big change, and we're going to view that report like so. Now we can see that we're not short of anything by that margin. If I search again, we can see there is nothing we're short by. If I wanted to search by all of our locations, if we had more than 1 stores, for example, we can see a better example here like so. And what this shows is, let's take Big Change, for example. We could say, for Big Change Limited, we've said for a Chubb fire extinguisher, which is a foam, we have a reorder level of 50. Now we can see it's gone red here. This shows that we're now short of this particular piece of equipment or stock. We can see that we're currently holding 0, so we're short by 50. Now, this is a really useful function, as I mentioned, to ensure that you never do run short. And what we can do to ensure that we're continually made aware of this is create a schedule. So we can create a schedule to ensure that this stock reorder level is sent potentially on a Sunday evening or a Monday morning, so it sits in your inbox, ready for you to check at all times. It can be done daily or weekly or monthly, however, whatever the preference might be. So going back into this stock and equipment within the CRM. So we mentioned before adding pieces of equipment to sites. So I'm going to go into this particular piece of equipment here, like so, that I've added. It's a Hikvision camera. So we've added some details about this camera. Now, there is certain details that we might want to be alerted on this particular piece of equipment for a variety of different reasons. So I'm going to move forward to this tickets function here. Again, a really useful function within our CRM, within our stock and equipment and our CRM. So if I select this tickets function here, this allows us to create an item, a note, that will allow us to be alerted on a specific action against this item. So it might be that you want to be made aware of a calibration date, for example. So if I was to type in ticket type, we might want general, and we might say calibration date. So what we can do is we can then say, add in some detail about this. So we could say, please be aware that this item needs its calibration on 17th of March 2021. So we'd select that, we can see the detail of that there like so, and we can then put a due date in. Now, we might actually want to be made aware of that a couple of weeks before it's actually due, and we could say it's due on the 3rd of March at 9 o'clock, and we can then assign it to a particular person. Now, this automatically assigns it to myself, but if I wanted to assign it to one of my colleagues, Serge, for example, we could add that in like so, and then that could, if Serge was working within my team, that would automatically make Serge aware that this piece of equipment is due its calibration. So moving forward to jobs, Again, this is something I want to touch on in a bit more detail this afternoon, but if we have a calibration required on a piece of equipment, it might be every year, for example, and it might need to be our own piece of equipment rather than our customer's piece of equipment, and that's something I will touch on later on. So we can see, we can set up the recurrence here. So if we wanted to recur a job against a particular piece of equipment, we could say, how often does it recur? So we're going to say this one recurs, we're going to say the first Monday every 12 months, for example. So we can go right up to 100 months, however often it needs to be done. We're just going to say it's going to be done yearly. And potentially you might want this recurrence to go on forever. You might want it to recur only for 10 years, etc., however you wish. So we're going to say, right, we want this recurrence to start on the first Monday of every 12 months, and it might start, let's say, on the 4th of May, for example. We can see that the first date is the 4th of May, then the 3rd of May 2021, etc. And we can then choose what job type we want it to be. So we could put in, for example, let's just put it's an install, and then we can save it, and then that will automatically be created against that particular piece of equipment at all times. So if we save that piece of equipment and go to planned, we can see that the next job that is planned for this piece of equipment is at our site. Will be, it's unallocated currently, but we can see that it's due to take place. And when it will come up within our unscheduled jobs that it's due to be allocated to an engineer to go and complete a piece of work against it. So just moving forwards again, I'm now going to show you, just going back into the stock, I'm going to show you the movements of this. So we're going into the stock that's holding the site, and we can see that there's currently 100 pieces of equipment. If we go into the movements tab, we can see that there has been no movements against this particular piece of equipment. However, it might be at this point that we want to allocate it at a certain level to a vehicle. Now, the way that this can be managed is twofold. Now, a lot of companies will allow their engineers to go into the stores and select and explain, I have taken 30 of these screws. It really depends how you want to work, but other companies want full management of that. And what it allows us to do is the engineer needs to inform somebody in the back office that certain quantity levels have been taken from the stores and added to a vehicle. So in that instance, we can say, we can now allocate 30 of these to a vehicle. So we're going to do it to SF17, like so. And they've now moved here like so to SF17, like so. And we can see they'll be in here. They'll be in here like so. So in exactly the same way that we can hold stock and equipment within a customer site or our site, we can also see we have the ability to hold quantity levels in each vehicle. Once again, we can have reorder levels in the exact same way to ensure that each vehicle never runs short of a particular piece of stock or equipment. And again, we can create movements. So within my vehicle here, SF17 SJF, we can see that there's a variety of different information here like so. So we can see we've got a foam 3 litre, for example. If we take it here, we can see when it was picked up, 18th of October 2018 at 12:52. We're holding one and it's currently in transit. If it has been created for a particular job, we can see which job it's been used at. Again, if I take this CCTV camera here, we can see a bit more information. So we can see it was picked up on the 20th of March 2019. We're holding one, and it was picked up from here and it was dropped off at a different date. We can see it's the same time here, but we can see if it's been picked up and then moved, we can track the whole movement of each piece of equipment there, like so. And there's all the movements. Fine. So we also have the option here to reallocate all items. Again, this is really important if you are moving stock from one vehicle to another. Now, often we get asked the question, you know, a vehicle might go into the garage for some repair work, and all the equipment's moved from one vehicle to another. Is there a quick way of moving all the items at one point? Now, yes, there is. Alternatively, if you've got a new vehicle, you can add a new vehicle in the system and then move it all, reallocate it all, and it will just automatically create a movement from one vehicle to another very, very quickly. Okay, perfect. So this afternoon, I'm also going to go through creating a piece of equipment that's going to be worked on a particular job and how we go through that. I will touch on it very quickly now, just to explain the ability to do that. So if I go to Leeds City Building, Control Services, in fact, if I go to a different contact, Alliston School, that I often use for demonstrations, here we can see we have a number of different pieces of equipment that we're holding at this customer site. And if I go into jobs, we can see the actual jobs and the planned jobs that have taken place. Again, as I mentioned, I will go through this in a lot more detail tomorrow, but we can see, this afternoon, but we can see a history of work that we've done on that particular piece of equipment. So we can see on this particular piece of equipment has had one job against it. It was done on the 26th of March at 11:59, and we can see it took 2 minutes, and then we can see the job card that is associated to it. So we can see all the details of everything that took place on that job. So I'm sure many of you have seen these forms before, but we can see it's got the stock items included, like so, with all the pictures there, like so. So that's the kind of the end of the presentation. I hope that you found it useful, and I'm now going to go into a question and answer session. If anybody has any questions, we're going to move forward like so. So I'm going to unmute everybody, and it might be quite difficult to manage because we haven't had any questions sent through. But if you've got any, please feel free to ask over the webinar now.
Yeah, where are you now?
In fact, what I'm going to do is, if you've got a question now, if you could send it through to my email, it might make it slightly easier, and then we can move forward that way. So I'll give you. Oh, I've got some on the chat actually. Okay, so in fact, the best way of doing it, sorry, is to send it through the chat. So, can a stock item be consumable and non-consumable? Yes, it can. So you've got the option to create a stock. So when we create a stock item, we have to define whether that particular stock item is a consumable and non-consumable. However, we do have the ability to say stock items in general can be consumable and a non-consumable. Yeah, absolutely. The next question, is it too late to join the later session? No, it's not. Please send an email to simon.field@bigchange.com, and then we can move forward that way, and I'll send you an invite. So how do you get an asset to be the first thing an engineer sees on his tablet so that he knows what he's working on? So that's a question we've just received. So when we go into when we go into a job, and again, I'm going to touch on this later this afternoon, there's a variety of different ways to do this. Particularly on a worksheet, we've got the ability to add conditional branching. And what conditional branching means is we can push the engineer to be moved to the right area of the system, basically. So, for example, we might have a question on a worksheet: are you dealing with customer assets on site, for example? If they select yes to that question, and we've allocated the equipment that they need to be servicing on that particular job, it will push them to the right screen on their device, which will say, right, these are the items that you need to be servicing on this job. As I explained, I will be going back to this later on this afternoon to allow myself to demonstrate this. Would stock have to be manually taken away from the totals to reflect the true level, or will the driver's tablets take away the stock overall? So there's two ways of doing it. Stock, and both will deplete the quantity levels depending on how you want to work. So the first way of working is to allow your engineers to explain what levels of stock they have removed from the stores and added to their vehicles. So you might give engineers full flexibility and to do that, which means that the engineer will go into your stores and they will say, for example, collect 10 screws. It will then deplete the quantity of screws from your stores and then add them to that engineer's vehicle. And then when you looked in your stores, you'd then have 90 screws left in your stores and 10 being added to the vehicle. Alternatively, we have had potentially some customers like to work in a different way, where the engineer will just inform the back office and say, I have collected 10 screws. And then the back office will deplete the quantity manually and add it to their van manually as well. But both work as well. I will be we are recording these sessions as well. Fine. Has anybody got any other questions that they want to add at this point? We do have another 10 minutes or so if required. We've got one through now. Okay, so we can add that as a custom field. So the question for everybody is adding a last cost date to indicate how old that cost is. So what we could do is, on all your pieces of stock and equipment, we can add in a custom field. So for example, we could go in like so, and we could say for every single piece of equipment, that's a CCTV cameras like so, we can say last cost date. I'll just move this here. Last cost date. We can use the date functionality here like so to add it on, and then that will allow you to record a last cost date against each particular item if required. The other thing is as well, a bit like the calibration dates, we can add notes or tickets to remind you that you need to update the costs if that was how you wanted to work. Yeah, and we will send these videos at a later date. So the vehicle had the items as in transit. So what that means is they are currently moving. So they're in movement. So they are located in that vehicle, but they're in transit. They are moving. So that's all that means. If we have third-party suppliers, is there a link that we can send so they can give us their stock levels? We can update stock levels if they are inputted in, not through a link at the moment. Can the engineers add items when they purchase it from suppliers to then book them straight out on a job? So the question is, just to be clear, can the engineer add items when they purchase it from suppliers to then book them straight out onto a job? So yeah, absolutely. So when an engineer is out on site, they've got the ability to add two different things. Well, predefined items is separate, but they are able to add to purchase a piece of stock or equipment from a supplier and add it as an expense as a job. So they can add their own pieces of equipment from their device, yes, and then expense that against the job, either to add as a zero line item on a job, or alternatively, if you are charging the customer for it, it will add in as a financial item if required, yes. And then if required, you can change it from the back office. So the engineer will only put in the cost price, what it's cost them, and you can then allocate the selling price from the back office, so the engineers wouldn't need to be aware of that. Okay, when an engineer swaps vans, would the stock levels be changed normally by back office, or the engineer can do this via tablet? So yeah, they can do it either way. Yeah, we can add our SIT numbers to pieces of equipment as well. So has anybody got any additional questions that they want me to answer? Yeah, we can transfer stock straight from the stores directly onto a job without going through the engineers. And again, I can go through this in a bit more detail this afternoon. So we will look at doing a Q&A sheet after the tutorial, yeah, for sure. Any other questions? We've got a few minutes. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so for you to add any more questions in. As I said, please feel free to dial in this afternoon. So I will go through. So custom fields on the devices, yes, they are visible for the engineers to see. Custom fields on the device. Again, I will go through that. I will get onto the device this afternoon in a bit more detail. This is a back office view at the moment. I will go through the tablet this afternoon, yeah. So we can't do a bulk movement of stock from stops sorry, we can't do a bulk movement of stock from the stores to do on a job. We can add pieces of equipment to be used on a job though, or we could bulk move it to a vehicle, yeah. So I'll give it another 30 seconds or so to get your questions in, and then we will reconvene this afternoon. If anybody needs a link to that, please email simon.field@bigchange.com and I will add you to that meeting this afternoon. So this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about purchasing stock and equipment, so how we can create purchase orders and book the stock into our stores. So we'll go through the creation of purchase orders. I'm going to go through worksheets on pieces of equipment. So what that means is there might be particular questions that you want the engineers to be answering on their device based on the type of equipment that you were servicing. And again, how we can use conditional branching to use stock. And then I'm going to go through adding stock and equipment to a job. So I'm going to go through adding parts to a job that need to be taken to site and brought back. I'm going to complete a piece of the job, complete a job on a piece of equipment that is already on site. So one of your customers' assets, and with a worksheet on it. We're going to remove a piece of equipment. We're going to add stock from our vehicle onto the site and create stock movements. And then we're going to add a part to a piece of equipment. So, for example, adding batteries to a piece of equipment. And then we're going to go through the financials of how they're added onto a job. Can you import a CSV of stock to initially add it all on? Yes, absolutely. So we do have a CSV file that allows you to add all stock and equipment into our system. Absolutely. 2 jobs. So I think the adding jobs is more about scheduling, and I will. One of my colleagues, Danielle, she was within that. She was in that session, I think earlier this week, and I'll refer you there. So her email is danielle.kayman, Kayman @bigchange.com. So, any more questions that anybody would like me to answer in this session before we move on to this afternoon? Thank you. If anybody has found this useful and wants to refer us to anybody who's not using our system, please feel free to send anybody at Big Change an email. If you want to send it to myself, it's simon.field@bigchange.com. Thank you everybody for joining. It's been great, and I look forward to speaking to you all this afternoon. Thank you. Yeah, we are, and just to be aware, we are recording these to be rewatched later on. Thank you very much, everyone.